those not expressed but very much with us.
P.D.Q. Bach lived from 1807 to 1742, the youngest and oddest of Johann Sebastian's 20-odd children. Although Johann managed to ignore the child for 5 years, the great Bach had managed to, under pressure from his wife, eventually give him a name. No, he didn't do that. He actually gave him initials. Asked by his family what the initials PDQ meant, he replied, absolutely nothing. P.D.Q. Bach, like his father, composed music, but in a very different style. We chose his music today. You'll hear 3 pieces of it today for its subtle playfulness. Here is the Sonata, Movement 2. And you have 2 more of those. Good morning. I'm Reverend Tom Capo, the minister here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. And welcome to those who are watching us on YouTube. Today we're going to explore play and how play might be useful to you on your journey through life. This service, in order to make it more real, will offer many opportunities for you to play today. Please keep in mind that these are only opportunities. You may pass in any of these activities that we offer to you today. But if you pass, we would encourage you to observe what happens around you with a sense of childlike wonder. Wonder why all these people are doing these strange things. Anyway. And you can also write down your observations. There's a little space in your order of service where you can share some information if you would like. Now, Jim and I have decided to offer, one of the things that we'll be offering today is an opportunity to do a little improv. And one of the improvs that you'll be able to do is that there will be an image, such like this image here, that seems to have no relationship to anything that I'm talking about. And then, Gemma, if you'll come forward, Don't do it just yet. Okay. In just a few moments, she's going to hit that gong, and you'll have your first opportunity to imitate what you see on the screen here. She'll hit the gong, you'll imitate, and then she'll hit the gong, and you can stop. So we're going to try this. So this is the image. Nicely done, nicely done. We'll have a couple more opportunities for that. And we hope you'll embrace those. I mean, we don't often take time to play, and that's part of what we wanted to offer today. For our opening words, I didn't want to offer just any kind of opening words. So I thought what I would do instead is to reflect on some behaviors and attitudes that I find common among Unitarian Universalists, or UUs as we call them here. And I did this because I thought there might be some people out there who've never been to a Unitarian Universalist service, and I thought, well, besides seeing their minister dressed a little oddly and doing these strange things, that they might want to know a little bit about what it is to be a Unitarian Universalist. So here are some things I've observed in Unitarian Universalists. Some UUs think that socks are too formal for summer services. In some Unitarian Universalist homes, even the cats and dogs get to vote on what the family views on television. Remember, we are part of the interdependent web of all existence. Some Unitarian Universalists consider Harry Potter and the Simpsons to be spiritual guides. Now, I've heard people take pilgrimage, Unitarian Universalists take pilgrimages from time to time, spiritual pilgrimages to Transylvania. I've also heard more recently Wakanda. Now, there really is a Transylvania, and there were Unitarians there in the 16th century, but there is no Wakanda, just in case people were thinking, I'm sorry. You might also notice when it comes up to the holidays that Unitarian Universalists have 5 different ways to say happy holidays. We have all kinds of things that we say during that time. And in home during the holidays, we all seem to have trees. Now, that we don't call them all Christmas trees or winter solstice trees or Passover trees, and many of them have ornaments, but not what you'd normally see, I guess, on different trees. They might have a Buddha or a Hindu Om or a Tao symbol or a pagan pentacle or a Jewish Star of David. Or with me, I put a Santa hat on the Buddha. I think that works. And of course, Unitarian Universalists consider coffee hour, the time between services and after services, as our most sacred of times. Play has grains of truth embedded in it. And with that, today you'll get to sing a couple of songs which have a little playful content. Now, this first hymn we're going to sing this morning was very popular in Unitarian Universalist churches about 40 years ago when I first became a Unitarian Universalist. It's called Forward Through the Pages. You're invited to stand in body or spirit and sing along.
We're going to try a classic improv exercise today, one that I learned last summer in seminary, and Meadville actually offers a class on improv for ministers as a reminder to stay flexible because life is often unpredictable. If you feel silly, that's okay. Move your body in whichever way feels comfortable for you. This exercise can be done sitting or standing up. And I'll begin a countdown from 8, moving my head and eventually making it down to my feet. And I'm going to show you an example. And then we can rise in body or spirit and try it all together. So start by shaking our head. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The fun part. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, ready to try?
I'm holding on.
Okay. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 7, 6.
Is that we're at 7?
Yeah.
Okay. 1, 7.
Did I start?
Start at 8 again.
Okay, sorry. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 1. Oh, I'm so bad at counting still. This is horrifying. Okay. That's okay. So I'm going to share a few thoughts on play. When I first left my first job, I tried to think of some parting words of wisdom to share. I was close with many of my colleagues, and I actually still am. And instead of opening the floor to embarrassing stories, I thought I would share something about myself. Although I left that job 5 years ago, I still believe what I said. I boiled the virtues down of life to 2, kindness and silliness. Kindness maybe is obvious, kindness as opposed to nice. Nice isn't bad, but it's more like being polite or having certain manners. For instance, it's nice not to slurp your soup, but it's not necessarily kind. Kind works for the ultimate good of all, with the goal that all feelings are honored and all needs are met. Silliness is the curveball I threw in there, and why silliness? Because it makes greater kindness possible. Thank you. During the 1930s, one of the most popular movie genres was extravagant musicals, elaborate sets and dozens of dancers in glittery costumes, a sharp contrast from life outside of the movie theater. Viewed with a realist lens, these movies make absolutely no sense. I've never once started humming to find myself backed by an entire orchestra and twirling in unison with everyone nearby. Some might even find it offensive, and it does take the right context. But the power of silliness is real. Last year, I had a rather challenging year, and many of us did. World news was not looking great. My personal life news was also not looking so great.
So I did what any normal person would do, and I went to clown camp. I became Chrysalis the Clown, as you can see. So I found out that the worse things were, the more silliness I needed to add to my life to balance things out. I needed to play fun songs on the ukulele, to watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine and drag queen videos. It wasn't extravagant or something extra. It didn't always work, but to the extent that I was able to show kindness to anyone, to be a more compassionate spouse or sister or friend or advocate, it was because of the power of silliness, and that's no joke.
Was a very musical family. All the kids were talented, all 20 odd of them. And so they had string quartets and orchestras and God knows what at home. And sometimes there was a shortage of instruments or whatever. This probably originated when somebody, broke his bow by mistake.
So I'm gonna call I always call you ushers, I'm sorry, it's a hard habit to break. So we're gonna enter into a meditation time, maybe even a kind of communion. And in a moment, I'm gonna invite the ushers forward to distribute some silly putty. And this is silly putty that my sister and I made at home. And so from one communal batch, we are each receiving our daily dose of silly putty. Take a little piece and then pass it down. Make sure it's distributed. No, I see somebody trying it. No, it's not meant for human consumption, sorry. I invite you to squish the silly putty. Hopefully everyone who wanted some got some. And mash it up in your hands. Smell the silly putty, that weird industrial rubbery smell. Don't taste the silly putty. Once again, not meant for consumption. Look at its shape, its texture. What does it remind you of? What does it sound like? It sometimes makes a little sound if you snap it apart or knead it with your fingers. Like us, silly putty is already awesome, without being sculpted or shaped into anything else. Like us, the putty bends and breaks, and like us, it's reconnected and healed. Amen and blessed be.
Ooh. So just recently I read a book, and I want to share a little bit of it with you today. It's called Finite and Infinite Games, A Vision of Life as Play and Possibility by Professor Emeritus of History and the Literature of Religion at New York University, James Carse. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I want to give you an experience of it as well. Get our microphones here. So Carse talks about play, and he talks about storytelling. He talks about game playing, and so we're going to do a little storytelling today. Storytelling, he says, is not really play if you're telling it to try to convince someone of something, but it is play if you just do it to do it. In other words, you're just telling the story to tell the story. And a really good story, if you tell a really good story, it gets you going and you want to tell that story to somebody else. And then they pass it on. So really good stories can go out into the universe and to everybody, and they're wonderful and transformative. And each time the story is told, something in you is put into that story. Some thought of yours, some feeling of yours, something is added to that story with each telling. So today, I'm going to ask you to tell a story. So I'll help you along, but it's really going to be the people here that tell the story. So here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to give a first line, and then I'll invite others of you to give a line. If you want to give a line, just raise your hand, and either Gemma or I will come by with the microphone and let you give a line. If you don't want to participate, again, you can pass. It's not a big deal. But we're inviting you to participate in this storytelling. So, are you ready? Ready? Okay. Once upon a time, there was a Unitarian Universalist who... Okay, somebody raise their hand. Give me a next line. Okay, here we go.
Went to a nature appreciation dinner.
Went to a nature appreciation dinner, and...
Then got into a large dump truck and drove down the street.
And then...
Had lots of crazy ideas.
which resulted in...
Doubling their pledge this year.
Oh, all right. It's going to be a really good story. Because of that, we need somebody else. Oh, here's one. Okay.
The pledge money was used for the Reverend to buy an awesome tie.
And because of that,
They climbed into a mountain.
and then,
They were rescued by a Yeti.
until finally, all right,
The mouse.
hold on.
They gave the Yeti their elevator speech. And all the animals became UUs.
At the end. Some people say that organizing Unitarian Universalists is like herding cats. And yet, you created a story here today. And it's just a story. It wasn't for any purpose. You just told a story. Carse says that what you did was infinite play. That's what telling a story for just telling a story is. Carse says there are two kinds of games. There are infinite games and there are finite games. Finite games are games like Monopoly, football, poker. And infinite games are games like having a tea party with your teddy bears, or playing hide and go seek, or pretending you are a kitten. All right. So, again, there are finite games and there are infinite games. Finite games, Monopoly, poker, football. What are some of the characteristics? Ooh, I need you back. What are some of the characteristics of finite games? Okay, Bob?
Someone wins and someone loses.
Someone wins and someone loses. Okay. Sue, did you have something? Say the same. Okay.
There's an end.
There's an end, yeah. There's another one back here. There are rules. Yep.
There's a way to do it wrong.
There is a way to do it wrong. Okay. All right, and what about infinite games? What are some of the characteristics of infinite games? You know, having a tea party, telling a story for no reason. What are some of the characteristics?
You use your imagination.
Use your imagination. What else? Molly?
Very inventive.
Inventive? Oh, no rules? Well, maybe there are some rules.
Unstructured.
Yeah. Hold on just a second.
Unstructured.
Oh, unstructured?
Unlimited snacks.
Unlimited snacks. That's good. Yeah. Here we go.
There's time to take a nap if you need to.
Okay, there's time to take a nap. All right, one more, and then would you want to run over that for me? Here we go. I've gotten all my exercise today.
Little children are very good at infinite games.
That is so true. Let me see, I'm on here, so I'm going to turn this over here. All right. So some of the things we've already said I want to reiterate. For finite games, there is a winner and a loser. There are rules. That it has structure. Infinite games, and so there's an end. There's a beginning and an end for finite games, right? With infinite games, there's creativity, there's spontaneity, but the thing that Carr says is most important is that infinite games are played to be played. They're not played to have an end. They're not played to have a winner. They can be played for an indefinite period of time. They could be played, you could keep playing them. For instance, you could go back and play being a kitten again later on today, though not while you're in the car. And he says, too, about play, and I think this is just in general about infinite and finite play, is that play is voluntary. You choose to play. If we're talking about a game that you're playing that you don't have a choice, like, for instance, if you took a gym class for credit in college, and maybe basketball or something like that, and you had to play it to get a grade, that's not play, according to Kars. Play is when you have a couple of people that get together and they say, hey, let's go play basketball together, and they just start playing, and it really doesn't matter that much how much they play or who scores what, they just are playing to play with one another. So again, it's voluntary. So as we go through this, that's an important piece to keep in mind. Kars also wants us to remember that play is something that can go on for a lifetime. Now, infinite play particularly, but finite play is something we can do periodically. It's really hard, though, to do them both simultaneously. So, for instance, you can play a card game during a tea party. So if you're playing at a tea party, you can play a card game. So it's an infinite game that you inject a finite game into it. But he says it doesn't really work as well to inject an infinite game into a finite game. Let's say you're playing soccer, and you decide, well, you're going to look up at the clouds and look at the shapes in the clouds, and wow, and start pointing at the shapes and telling people what the shapes are. Not going to be a successful soccer player. So he goes on in his theory to begin talking about that he believes that spirituality or spiritual journeys that people take where they ascertain what their values are, their beliefs are, what they think about the world, their vision of the world, that's spirituality or exploring your spirituality is an infinite game. That each of us in our lifetime, over a period of time, through our own experiences in life and choices, we play with ideas and beliefs and values and morals, and over time we decide which ones fit for us. And if we decide that they fit, we can give them importance or meaning to ourselves. And that's a personal thing. It's a personal journey that you take to do that. But he also says that even as you go through this journey and you try on different things, those labels that you use are not necessarily absolute. So for instance, I've played with my own spirituality, and so I call myself a Buddhist, humanist, panentheist, Unitarian Universalist. And none of those labels exactly fit for who I am. I use them because they describe aspects of who I am, but I wouldn't tell you that I'm 100% Buddhist. I don't think anybody in this room would say they're 100% of any particular label. So, for instance, with my Buddhism, I've played with lots of ideas and practices. I tend to lean in the direction of Zen Buddhism. I practice Zazen meditation. I try to have mental non-attachment to ideas. I practice mindfulness and loving kindness. And I do these with commitment and reverence, knowing that these are the practices that mean something to me right now. But I also know that my life may change. I may change. The world may change. And my practices, my ideas, my beliefs might evolve. And so I am not 100% Buddhist, but I'm playing with Buddhism. I also have played with prayer. The prayer I use today that means a lot to me is this. I say some name for the divine or divinity, whichever comes to mind. Then I affirm the blessings I have in my life, good things that have happened. And then I offer loving kindness to all those people I know that are suffering, particularly people I know, but then I offer loving kindness out to the world. And that's my prayer. That's different than where I was before. When I was very young, I was Catholic, and I would do the Our Father and the Hail Mary. And when I got to that place where I understood that those didn't work for me, they didn't feel right for me anymore, I began to play with prayer, trying different prayers from different religions and different authors. When I was new to Unitarian Universalism, I said things like, "Dear God, if there is a God, please save my soul if I have a soul." Even when I was struggling with what I believed, I still wanted to play with prayer a little bit. I said, I'm not sure how to start this. To whomever it may concern. But over time, I have found myself drawn to prayers by people who are playful. Unitarian Theodore Parker, he was a transcendentalist, and he's very playful in his words. And he really leans in the direction of nature. But I want you to listen to the beginning of one of his prayers that really stands out for me. O thou infinite one, who dwellest not in temples made by hand, but are a perpetual presence, living and moving and having thy being in every star that flowers above and every flower that flames beneath. Isn't that an image? Beautiful. And it resonates with me. Those are the kinds of prayers that really touch me. And Karst goes on to say that this, we've talked about this individual spiritual journey, but at some point we may decide that in our ethical and spiritual journey and trying to figure out what we believe, we might choose to join a community. And so he says that infinite play within a community for the purpose of spiritual and ethical growth is an infinite game. It's an ongoing process that we play with. And I think more than many other religions, that we as Unitarian Universalists intentionally play this game with one another as we responsibly search for truth and meaning, and as we value what each other says, and as we treat each other with respect and dignity. You know, this has been the history of our religion, too, to kind of play with ideas, to struggle with things. And, you know, our religion isn't the same as it was when it started. You know, it started with a Christian-based religion. But it was different than others. They believed Jesus was a human. And the Universalists believed that God was too good to send them to hell. Now, that was for a while. And then our religion became more humanist, focusing on how we live our lives in the here and now. And then over time became more pluralist, people of all different faiths coming together. You know, you've often heard from this pulpit from many different people that revelation is not sealed, our beliefs are not static, that we are all in process, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Karst says that the myths of Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad are exemplary, but no myth is necessary. There is no story that must be told. Stories do not hold truth that someone needs to reveal or someone needs to hear. It's not necessary in infinite play to be Christians. Indeed, it's not possible for anybody to be truly Christian. Neither is it possible for anybody to be Buddhist or Muslim or atheist or a Chicagoan. All such labels are playful abstractions. And infinite players are not serious actors in any story, but the joyful poets of a story that continues to originate what they can never finish. Religion, spirituality, is one infinite game. Now, he does say that it's important for us to recognize that as we play these games, that we need to be aware that sometimes when someone's playful, sometimes people can get hurt. When I was first a Unitarian Universalist, I really enjoyed these discussion groups we had. And one of the discussion groups, this adult discussion group, we would get together and watch a film and then discuss it. And usually, you know, it's the history of some religion or something like that. And so I sat down and we all got together and the guy brought out the DVD. It wasn't DVD then, it was, VHS. It was a long time ago. He plugged it in and it began to scroll a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And yes, what we did is we watched Star Wars. And we had this great discussion afterward about its theology and the meanings of it and all this kind of stuff. There were times during the discussion it became really heated. But we'd made a covenant with one another that if it ever got too heated, we would stop and remind ourselves of what the basic covenant we had for each other was, so that we wouldn't hurt one another's feelings. And the covenant we held was, it's better to be compassionate than to be right. And I believe that as we all here in this church in Unitarian Universalism, as we all play the game of religion and spirituality, that is a really good rule. That's the one I try to remember when I play. So that if somebody says something that hurts somebody else's feelings, that we stop the game. To stop the religious game, the spiritual game. We step back. We remind ourselves that we care for each other. We discuss our feelings. We talk about who was hurt and why, who felt marginalized. Then we forgive one another, and we begin the game again in love, affirming it's better to be compassionate than to be right. Unitarian Universalism is an incredible religion. I think we're doing something exceptional here, incredible, something very difficult, but also wonderfully rewarding and enriching to our lives. We are participating, intentionally participating in an infinite game with one another. And we'll continue to play at this game, honoring each other's worth and dignity, respecting each other's beliefs, encouraging each other to grow spiritually and ethically, and affirming each other's responsible search for truth and meaning. Self-help author Debbie Ford wrote, "Your soul is infinitely creative. It is alive and expansive in nature. It is curious and playful, changing with the tides of time." So my friends, as you play together and play alone, this infinite game of spirituality and religion, I invite you, be curious, be creative, be playful. And as you do, be open to the possibility that you might change. And be prepared in heart and mind that you may grow in ways that you might not ever expect. So may it be.
A Buddhist monk approached a hot dog vendor for a veggie dog, saying, "Make me one with everything." When he received his lunch, he handed the vendor a $20 bill and waited until he had run out of patience. "What about my change?" the Buddha said. The hot dog vendor smiled. "Change comes from within." While change comes from within, making a church with everything costs more than a $20 bill. The offering for the work of this church will now be given and received.
So you can see that was just too much for PDQ to put up with. And so he left home and was never heard from again until Professor Schickley, who did not care for ice fishing and was teaching at the University of Northern North Dakota, decided he just had to do some research, because what else could you do if you don't go ice fishing in that cold winter? So he eventually, in his research, discovered PDQ Bach and brought him back. We are so grateful that he brought him back to our awareness so that we can too appreciate him. So here we are with our last part of the sonata, and if you listen carefully, you might notice that there's evidence that PDQ spent some time in Turkey.
We do have some exceptional musicians in this congregation. Whatever that means, right? And now it's time for us to extinguish our chalice. Let it carry its flame in our hearts as we prepare for our sacred coffee hour. So I invite you now to rise in body or spirit and let us sing our hymn, Coffee, Coffee, Coffee. The words will be projected to my left, or your left. I don't know if you've read the newsletter this time. Given our open rate, I'm not sure if you did, but read it through. There are funny little things, sort of Easter eggs throughout the newsletter. I invite you to take a look. So let us close this service with a smile. So look around and smile at each other. I mean, a really, really big smile. Give everyone a little bit of smile. Don't worry if you giggle a little bit, because laughter, joy, happiness, giggles, smiles, play helps us to be more resilient as we face all that's out there in the world. Let us share the love of this community with one another. You're already doing it.